Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. Returning to the podcast, it's been quite a while, is Etienne de la Boissier Squared. You can check out his Substack, again, artofliberty.substack.com. He's got a bunch of publications there, and he's got a new book as well. To see the cage is to leave it. You can get it through his website in digital format or hard cover. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, it is great to be with you and your audience once again.
A lot is going on. You're always busy. What's if you want to, maybe we can start with your new publication and the work you're doing. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I've got a new book. The book is called "To See the Cage Is to Leave It: 25 Techniques the Few Use to Control the Many." And just to kind of set the table for the audience, you know, I'm a voluntarist author. I don't believe in the legitimacy, the necessity, or the desirability of having a government. And in both my book, To See the Cage Is to Leave It, and my first book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, How Intergenerational Organized Crime Runs the Government, the Media, and Academia, I really make the case that government is best thought of as a technique for robbing and controlling populations. And in the new book, what I do is I break down 25 different kind of sub-techniques that governments are using surreptitiously on the population to get them to go along with having a ruling class. And so some of these are, you know, obvious. There's the mandatory government school, where children are forced, you know, to learn about, you know, where they're taught about the legitimacy, the necessity, and the desirability of having a government before they're old enough to really question the morality and the logic of that claim. That's controlling that, you know, it's a form of controlling the information the population receives through these mandatory government schools. There's a youth program where, you know, the kids are given awards for participating in the flag worship and regurgitating the indoctrination of the statism. They're inculcated into this, you know, kind of pre-military training that is ultimately going to produce police officers and military members that are willing to set their morality aside and use violence on peaceful people. And really the whole thing is a kind of a religion, and that religion is known as statism. And statism is the indoctrinated belief in having a government in the first place, even though there is no ironclad law of the universe that says that a government is necessary, legitimate, or desirable. And so they're really using, the government has been using all of the tricks and the techniques of an unethically manipulative religion or a cult, disingenuous religion, or, you know, or we're running, you know, techniques. We're running unethically manipulative techniques on people to get them to tithe, to pay their taxes, and to go along with being robbed. And if you don't understand that these are going on, you know, if you don't understand that the media is product placing the flag at moments of high positive emotion, if you don't understand that the media is, you know, doing, in some cases, dozens and dozens of product placements of the flag in movies and television shows, over 1,000 movies and over 1,000 television shows that researchers have been able to trace back, you know, either intelligence agency or Defense Department funding, almost anything you see that has military equipment. Hollywood has given the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies the ability to rewrite those scripts, and in some cases even change history, you know, of what may be showing in a war movie or something. You know, the My Lai massacre might get excised out, and the military might be saving babies or doing something that wasn't really indicative of what was really going on in the time during that conflict. And so that ability to control the information that people receive and to be able to surreptitiously, you know, everything from, you know, like one of the techniques is the government's been caught putting subliminal text into television sign-off messages in the 1960s, where as text is scrolling across the screen, it's saying, "Trust in God, government." Obey the government. And so you would not believe how many different techniques the government is using on the population to get them to have a warm and fuzzy about the government, from the stadium flyovers, the flag worship, ceremonies at the stadiums, to putting the American flag on the backboard of NBA, on the NBA backboard, so that you subconsciously associate the exhilaration of the goal with the goal, the exhilaration of the goal with the flag. And so, once you see it, once you just flip through the book, you're like, wow, I never understood that this was going on. It's very, very powerful, and it's really designed to wake up your friends and your family and your colleagues to, oh my God, the government's trying to trick us. They're running tricks on us.
Yeah, and I'm coming at this from a biblical perspective, but I've become so disenchanted with the government and nationalism. They're trying to kill us. And I mentioned this on the past podcast, but there's someone who I hold in high regard. He's German theologian, Dr. Martin Erdmann, and he sent me this email last month. And he's digging up through texts going back centuries. He's publishing like a madman. And something he sent me, he found a book from 1920, and he says the true aim of nationalism, which is to unite smaller principalities into one country, like Germany in this instance, is simply a means to an end. It is meant to lead to a much larger group of nations being united to form a universal republic, like a world government, and the destruction of all other nations. And I just want to, again, go back to the screen share to share something related. Give me a second. I didn't put the audio. Let me put that again. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Show your table of contents there. And you mentioned like military basic training. We're seeing many countries around the world now bring that back, right? The military training in Croatia, they just did that, many European countries. And I think what you mentioned, the movies. So Annie Jacobsen, who's a well-known writer, I've got some of her books behind me on Area 51. Ben Norton points out a writer, Annie Jacobsen, on horrible Amazon Prime show Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, admits the series is CIA propaganda. And maybe you've seen this clip. I forget this actor's name. This was years ago, where they're talking about regime changing Venezuela. I'm just going to play a few seconds.
What would you assume is the most major threat on the world stage? Anybody, just call it out. You don't have to raise your hand.
Definitely Russia.
Definitely Russia. That's confident. I like it. Who says Russia? Anybody agree with her? Hands? Okay, great. Who else?
China.
Stop yelling at me, but China is a good answer. Anybody? Who else? China?
North Korea?
North Korea. Any North Korea takers? And Venezuela? Anybody? Nope. Oh, yeah. One guy in the back. A little worried about Venezuela. Everybody's cool with Venezuela? No threat? Okay. Let me ask you this. Which one of these places can claim to have the largest oil...
So people get the idea, but just your further thoughts on, some of these latest techniques. Do you see people seeing the cage and leaving it increasingly?
Oh yeah, and so kind of one of the kind of cool things about both of my books, both Government, the Biggest Scam in History, and To See the Cages, to Leave It, is that they're both kind of one of those rare titles. Maybe 0.0001% of all books published ever are bought in bulk, where people are buying 5 and 10 copies. And so we sell them as a friends bundle, but over 10% of the books that we sell are people that realize how important the book is, and then they buy a 5-pack or they buy a 10-pack. They donate them to libraries. They put them, like, people send me pictures of them, dropping them off at little mini libraries in their neighborhood. Grant Elman, the front man of Presence, used to manage Airbnbs in Aspen, and he would make it the coffee table book on his Airbnb, in his Airbnbs. People leave them in Ubers, and we just had our largest friends bundle order ever. And there is a retired secretary in North Carolina that is about to drop 258 copies of To See the Cage is to Leave It to sheriffs, police chiefs, VIPs, and others in North Carolina. And so people are using the book to wake up their friends, their family, and their neighbors. And like I said, very, very rare, maybe, 0.0001% of books are bought in bulk, but we've been consistently since the beginning selling over 10% of all the books that we sell are people that are buying these things in bulk, including, some people are buying 258 at a time, to wake up their communities. And once you flip through the book, I use a lot of techniques, that you can't help but you can't help but see it, even if you just flip through the book. And so the fact that it is so image rich and that I'm using visualization to make something that was previously invisible now visible, that's very, very powerful. It hits the brain very quick. And so people, cannot help but go, hey, the government is running. I did not get it. And, but like now I get it. And then most people don't want to be tricked. And so they, like when people find out that the government is tricking them, is trying to trick them, then they're kind of like, I'm out, like nobody likes to be chumped, tricked, or fooled. So very powerful.
And I want to get your thought on some of what's going on. But we've seen with every election cycle, they sell us, they've gotten a little bit better at it, but they sell us these fictions. They try to get our buy-in. And I've heard you talk, you were recently on Richard Grove's program, and I agree with you on your assessment. The whole Biden thing was artificially created to swing the pendulum to get Trump in. And you've got how they've manufactured consent. Like they put up Pete Hegseth, this figure like Hegseth, and he's cosplaying like Tom Cruise and Top Gun. I don't know if you've seen some of those videos where they've created for him. All these memes, like you had Dan Bongino, and then this whole MAGA stuff. It seems to slowly be fading away. And again, I want to share my screen here. The Department of Labor just posted this tweet: trust the plan, trust Trump. And I'm like, are you guys serious? Here was my response. Good joke. Everybody laughed. But it seems like QAnon was a military occult operation, as it was to help bring in Trump. And he's the guy now trying to sell us on globalism. Like the Department of Labor is tweeting, globalism has been defeated. We're going to Americanism. In my mind, Americanism is globalism, in a sense, because the framework of, as I mentioned earlier, it was founded by occult Freemasons, the United States, George Washington. And I think that's the model for the world federation, world government. And Trump is bringing in the surveillance state, the technocracy, the North American Union. So just your thoughts on the latest, Venezuela. You did an interesting podcast on that. So tell us a bit about what you think is happening with the latest Venezuela.
Well, let's talk about Trump, and then we'll segue into Venezuela. But so we've got an organized crime government. It's the banks at the top. The banks are creating money out of thin air using fractional reserve banking that they have mandated using government. And so think of government as the tool that they're using to get away with fractional reserve banking, where when you go to a bank to get a mortgage or a car loan, you're not borrowing other depositors' money. They just credit your account with digital dollars, even though that's inflationary and stealing the value out of everybody's money. And so now the banks have bought up all of the media. So now that the quote unquote profits, it shouldn't even be, called a profit, but the biggest building in every city in the world is usually a bank, right? And so where are they getting all of this money? They're stealing it out of the value of everybody else's money. And so that is the big scam. Now, what allows them to do that is that they are using You don't really have to have a government. We'd all be dramatically wealthier without a government. There'd still be roads. There'd still be fire departments. There'd still be armed protective services that they call the police. There'd still be dispute resolution. It would be a lot better than what we have now. But you're never allowed to explore that idea in a government school or a state college. You'll never ever hear that. It will never be recommended for you by YouTube. It will never be suggested for you by Facebook. You will never hear a controlled opposition voice have a principled voluntarist that can explain the economics behind that idea on their, overfunded podcast, where they're trying to keep everybody on the plantation of left, right elections. Everybody just has to vote harder. The government isn't, the government's legitimate. And so every channel, the government's legitimate, the government's legitimate, the government's legitimate, the government's legitimate, the government's legitimate. And so what they're doing is the banks have created all this money. They've bought up the media so that on every single channel, you're being tricked into a system that you can't win. So they control both sides, the Republicans and Democrats. It is a television show that they're essentially putting on in Washington, D.C. They make it look all legitimate, but within 5 seconds, if somebody like me was actually given, the opportunity to make the case against government, it's so easily shot down. You cannot delegate a right that you do not have yourself to a representative to represent you doing something that you don't have the ability to do yourself. You can't be bound by a social contract, the Constitution that you did not sign. My lovely fiance and myself cannot vote to rob you because there's two of us and one of you. And so all of the ideas behind government are dumb and they're illogical and they're immoral. It's absolute. It's based on extortion. It's based on theft. But they're tricking the population into having this ruling class by controlling the information the population receives, so that the only thing that they see on television is the government's the hero. Pete Hegseth is is like Top Gun Maverick. Kristi Noem is, the hot, Department of Homeland Security babe, and these are actors, and Trump himself is an actor, and Trump has a theatrical agent, and Trump's theatrical agent. So the big scam and the joke of The Apprentice was Trump was the apprentice. Can we give this clown the media training and the artificial gravitas? Can we make him look like a successful businessman, even though he's been bankrupt 4 times? He was bailed out by the Rothschilds in 1993. They did his workout. They restructured his debt. They provided, fresh financing, and they've had him by the balls ever since. And Trump appointed, a lot of people don't realize this, Trump appointed Wilbur Ross, who was the Rothschild banker that did his workout and made him Secretary of Commerce as a payback in the first Trump administration. That was the Rothschild banker that kept his failing business empire afloat, and they've had him by the balls ever since. And he is just a puppet, and it is just a television show, and he was given this media training, and he has a theatrical agent. And a lot of people don't realize this. His theatrical agent's name is Ari Emanuel, and Ari Emanuel is the brother of Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel was the chief of staff during the Obama years. He was Obama's chief of staff. He's the guy that said that famously, you never want to let a crisis go to waste. A crisis is the opportunity to do something that you couldn't do in any other, context. And the other brother is a guy named Ezekiel Emanuel, who is a eugenist that thinks everybody ought to die by age 75, or kill themselves by age 75. And he's written a book about that. And he was one of the members of Joe Biden's, COVID-19 task force. And so that's Trump's theatrical agent. That's the guy that they gave him the media training. And so what are the odds that Trump's theatrical agent is the brother of, essentially the fixer, the controller during the White House, the person that controlled Obama's schedule. This is Zionism. It's Rothschild Zionism. The Rothschilds founded the state of Israel. We are now transferring billions and billions of dollars to Israel. Trump's policies support Israel. Trump is supporting the genocide in Gaza. We're providing weapons. We're providing support. We're providing Palantir technology that allows them to improve the targeting and even including wiping out families, so they know that when the family is together, they can hit them with one bomb and get a whole bunch of people. And that's some of the Palantir technology that the United States is giving Israel to be able to use in their massacre of the Palestinians. And so what are the odds that all of these people are connected? And so it is a television show. It is a puppet show, and they get away with it because they have monopolized the media and they're controlling every screen, and every screen is either deception or distraction. Can we just get you focused on something else, whether it's children's sports played by adults, whether it's divide and conquer that we're doing, whether it's, fake Trump trials where everybody's like hanging by the edge, or, it's really the ability to take the attention of the population and to be able to steer it to things that either don't matter, or to, lie, like known liars, known proven liars where you cannot trust a word that comes out of Trump's mouth. Yet he's been installed in this position because the whole thing is intergenerational organized crime. It's the biggest, government has been the biggest scam in all of human history. And this is how they get away with it, because they control the media, they control the information society receives through the mandatory government school, the state-run universities, and this media system where they control every screen.
And I want to get your further thoughts on Venezuela, because I think a certain segment of the population have been put under a spell. They're under a veil. A lot alt media folks, I'm gonna get your thoughts on that as well. Are cheerleading everything Trump is doing, and it's like I put a post out the other day. They got some traction where I put a map from 1940, the official map of the 1940 technate of America, which includes Greenland, Canada, all the way down to Venezuela and Colombia. I'm like, this is the play, and people are cheering it on. It's like, what, like, guys, like this has been planned. Literally, here's a map from 100 years ago, and you're cheering it on. And this is actually the destruction of whatever is left of the nation state. And it's de facto globalism, because you're moving to supranationalism, and you're cheering it. And then they're tweeting at the same time, Department of Labor and White House is saying, down with globalism, when you're literally before our eyes. I said in real time, we're watching the construction. Orwell wrote about this in 1984, which was published in 1949. And he's talking about Oceania, which is the technate. And so people are under this spell. And so just your thought, but on top of that, you've got stuff that's, as you mentioned, the banks, the oligarchs are just taking that wealth from Venezuela, whether it's oil, which can be used to run for the refineries that in the Gulf, or the data centers, all the other minerals. So just your further thoughts on what's going on there.
Well, let's talk about the people that are cheering it on. And so again, one of the techniques that I describe in the new book, to see the cage is to leave it, is essentially, that they've tricked the population into thinking that you're an American. You're an American. It's been decided for you. Okay. You're not, and if you really, really think about it, America is a giant fake artificial tribe. Your real tribe are your physical neighbors. It's your church. It's your close friends and your family. That's your real tribe. That's who you have loyalty to. That's who you have identity with. That's who everybody helps each other to get by, your real community. If you live, I grew up in Texas. People that live in Texas have very little in common with people that live in Portlandia. Okay. And Portlandia has very little in common with people that live in Hawaii. And Hawaii has very little in common with people that live in Alaska. And so it's an artificial tribe where they're running these techniques to get you to put your identity around not being a free and independent human being that was just born into this control system, into this fake, completely indoctrinated belief system, 100% an indoctrinated belief system where they forced you to go to a government school and they've taught you that you're an American before you're old enough to go, hey, wait a minute, do I want to sign on to all the crimes of America? Do I want to sign on to the regime change? Do I want to sign on to, the My Lai massacre? Do I want to sign on to the Phoenix program? I mean, like, I'm not for the Phoenix program in Vietnam that you murdered people extrajudiciously. I'm not for, the CIA running drugs into the United States. Hey, I'm not for, the government lying about, the Gulf of Tonkin so that they could, murder people in Vietnam and make trillions off of war that didn't need to be fought. I do I really support that? But because they're doing it through the media and they're running these tricks and they're putting the American flag and they're making the government the hero and they're making the military the hero. And because most people have been subsumed into this propaganda system without understanding that the government's running game on them, they have a warm and fuzzy about being an American and they think that it's their team, even though it's not really their team. And so it's actually kind of humorous when you see people wearing the flag of the system that is stealing half their money. Okay. Like if you're wearing the flag of the system that is stealing half your money, like they've already kind of won. Because this is the battlefield right here. It's the human mind. Can they trick you into going along with something that's not really in your interest? And you don't really benefit, you're not really going to benefit from any of the oil that's stolen in Venezuela, and you're not really going to benefit from anything that the United States does in Iran, and you're not really going to, there's going to be people that are going to benefit, and they're going to make trillions of dollars, and it's going to come out of your paycheck, and it's going to come out of your pocket. And, one of the examples this week is, Trump is going to stick the taxpayer, came out publicly and said he's going to stick the taxpayer with the bill for the oil companies to rebuild the oil infrastructure in Venezuela. Now, if anybody that knows anything about the oil industry, it's kind of usual and customary for the multi-billion-dollar, very wealthy oil industry to fund their own investment and their own gear and their own, whatever, because they're going to make the lion's share of the profits. But the American people are so mentally ill and so tricked into this thing that they think that they can get away with sticking it to the taxpayer to fund something that the oil industry, even in a kleptocratic, we're stealing the Venezuelans' oil, ought to be funding themselves. So it really is, it's powerful mind control. The majority of the population is under it. This is what we're trying to do at the Art of Liberty Foundation, expose how they're doing it and these tricks that they're running. But as long as the population believes that it's their team, that somehow they are personal, they're invested in the idea of being an American, and they think that when the United States steals another country's resources or assets, that is reflective of some kind of glory to them or some kind of benefit that they're going to receive. Well, then it's hard to unpack that propaganda from people that have never really stepped back and thought about the system as a whole, the legitimacy of it, and what's really going on in the world. And so that's kind of what I would say to that. We're the Team USA, rah, rah, rah. Team USA is the one that's stealing half of your money in overt taxes, covert taxes, and inflation. And the fact that you're cheering them on is mental illness.
Or any country. I'm here in Mexico. I'm a citizen of Mexico. They're just going insane, like full commie. The tax agency in Mexico, they just demanded platforms, so they're going to have access to my Amazon profile and my purchases. And it's like I'm thinking how they're going to differentiate from people who are foreigners. or Mexican citizens, and so they're going to have full total surveillance. They're jacking up. I just learned, read the statistics yesterday. Like 40 to 50% of my gasoline that I buy, Mexico has one of the highest gas prices from around the world. Half of my gas tank that I fill, the price, it's a tax for the Mexican government. And so they're just, I'm almost to the point, like, I'm not proud to be a citizen of Mexico anymore. I'm not proud to be a citizen of any of these countries, because they're just raping, pillaging, and impoverishing me and trying to democide me one way or the other. And just on your point of Venezuela, a lot of the Americans, and there have been reports about this, that wealth that's being stolen by Washington is not going to go to the average American. That's going to those oligarchs at the top. So it's actually accelerating the neo-feudalism. So the poor are getting poorer, the middle class is being wiped out, and all of these oligarchs, that's going to be benefiting them. It's not going to be benefiting the average American. And so just any other thoughts on Venezuela? We had Trump come out and say now he wants a $1.5 trillion defense budget, which is absolutely insane. And then he said something to the New York Times. He asked if there are any limits on his global powers. Trump says, yeah, there is one thing. My own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop me. I don't need international law. And I'm like thinking, this is like Nero, hubris. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, just any other thoughts there?
I'll say one thing to what you just said about Mexico, because I thought you made a really good point. And in my first book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, I really break down that, that when you think about the countries of the world, don't think of them as individual countries, but think of them as kind of tax farms and different tax farms, different tax plantations. And all of them are running the same. There's a playbook that I break down in Government, the Biggest Scam in History, that kind of goes across governments. And that playbook is, and there's some duplication in, like in the United States, in the new book, I focus on this, but, there's going to be they're all running mandatory government schools. They're all running, youth programs. They all have a flag, which is the indoctrinated, symbol of the government, which is in almost all cases has been turned into a kind of supernatural entity that promises to make the world a better place and to protect you from old age and from being sick. And there's nothing that the government cannot do. It can raise wages and lower prices at the same time. It can do, you name it, and it can accomplish it if you just have faith in it. And it really is an idolatry. And I wanted to recommend the guys at the Libertarian Christian Institute over the break, over Christmas week at artofliberty.substack.com. We published The Idolatry of Statism, which is a little pamphlet that we're going to be carrying in our bookstore, that really breaks down the idolatry of nationalism and how the flag is the indoctrinated holy symbol of this indoctrinated worldview that replaces God with the government. And that, the church, the school, the mandatory government school is the church. The teacher is the priest. You're going to learn the holy documents of the Constitution, or the Mexican Constitution in Mexico. You're going to be taken to Mecca, Washington, D.C. You're going to be taken to the cathedral of the capital that looks like the Vatican for a reason. You're going to be taken to the temples along the Potomac and shown the deities of Lincoln and Jefferson that are literally in Greek temples that are absolutely 100% Greek temples and absolutely deities, on high. And you're going to be subsumed in this religion before you're old enough to really understand it. They generally take you to Washington, D.C. as a middle schooler, and they're going to blow your mind, and everything's large and oversized, so you feel small and insignificant. And so they're running these tricks on you to get you to get this religion into you. And because most people adopt it as a religion. They don't think about it, but Mexico's running the same game. They're all illegitimate. Now, talking about Venezuela, let's transition there. Also on my Substack at artofliberty.substack.com, I just had the most fortuitous thing happen to me where I was scheduled for over a month to be on the podcast of a gentleman by the name of Jose Pierre. And Jose Pierre was the CEO of Citgo Petroleum. Citgo Petroleum runs 6,000 gas stations in the United States, but it is 100% owned by the Venezuelan government and by the Venezuelan oil company that was nationalized and runs all of the national of oil. And Jose, when he was CEO, they did a deal that somebody in the Venezuelan government thought was disadvantageous, and he was captured by Maduro with 5 other Citgo executives. So it was the CEO, the president, and 5 vice presidents that were out of the U.S.-based subsidiary, were in some cases U.S. citizens. They had flown for Thanksgiving meetings in 2017, and they are arrested and held hostage by Maduro for 5 years. Jose spent 10 years in solitary confinement. And he was, there you go. That is him. And he was part of something called the Citgo Six, where, they were arrested. They were held by Maduro. And then most fascinatingly, they are swapped for and literally out of a movie kind of thing. They've been held for 5 years. They're told, hey, get dressed. You're being released. They hood them up. They take them, they put them on a private plane run by the Venezuelan oil company. They fly them out to an island in the Caribbean where they're met by another jet, holding, Darcy Rodriguez, the former vice president of Venezuela, who's now the current acting president. So her jet lands, and then a jet from the DEA lands, and the DEA had arrested 2 of Maduro's nephews for drug smuggling, caught them on camera, hidden camera, the whole thing, tons of cocaine they were smuggling into the United States, and it arrested them. And so the Citgo Six, were swapped in this, 3 jets landing at a remote island in the Caribbean, and, they do a prisoner swap, and he is released. And so I literally, it's on my Substack, artofliberty.substack.com, got to interview the ultimate Venezuelan insider. And some of the things that we talked about were the fact that, that oil is essentially, a commodity and a currency. And so all wars are bankers' wars. And so the United States has part of, we're on is something called the petrodollar system. And the petrodollar system is essentially a deal that we cut in the 1970s with OPEC. So the bankers print ridiculous amounts of dollars that steals the value out of everybody else's money. It gets too much. You've got to do something to soak them up. So there's all of these dollars sloshing around the world, dropping the value of the dollar because, there's nothing that people can do with them. There's too many of them. They begin bidding up prices in the United States. They begin having an impact and driving prices, sky high as the people that have the early dollars begin bidding higher for goods and commodities. And there's a depreciation of the money that people earn and save. And so what did the United States do? The United States cut a deal with OPEC where, in exchange for us showing these feudal monarchies how to stay in power and how to crack down on internal dissent and how to protect them, giving guarantees against, other regimes, taking their oil wealth or whatever. And so we, in exchange for that, OPEC agrees to only price and sell oil in dollars. And so now countries around the world that were oil importing countries that have to buy oil from other countries because they don't have it domestically, they now have to buy and hold the US dollar where they never had to do it before. And the US dollar becomes the currency of the oil markets. And so that allows the bankers at the top, the organized crime system at the top of government, the people that are running government on you, the people that are profiting trillions and trillions of dollars from this organized crime system, they get to keep creating dollars out of thin air, because now people have to hold, and they have to do it for oil. Now, every once in a while, an oil producing country, because they don't like to lose value on the currency that they're taking for their oil, and that's what's happening with the oil. So they'll abandon the dollar. And once they abandon the dollar, that's when the US comes in, institutes regime change, and steals all of the oil and reprices it in dollars to be able to suck up this. So before Maduro did this, some of the other examples, Saddam Hussein in 2001, he was under a program called the Oil for Food program. The UN had a program, so he was under embargo, he was under economic sanctions, and so he was allowed to sell a certain amount of oil to get food and medicine and things like that in a UN program called Oil for Food. He had over $26 billion in US dollars in his account. He swapped them for euros. He made money on the deal. The euro appreciated, the dollar fell more. And then 2 years later, okay, we're going to gin up an excuse to invade. And then in 2003, we come in and we depose Saddam Hussein. And now Iraq's oil is being sold in dollars once again. Another example was Libya. And so Muammar Gaddafi was the head of Libya. So Iraq is the number 3 oil provider. Venezuela is number 1. Saudi Arabia is number 2. Iraq is number 3. Libya is number 7 on the list. And so Libya had accumulated $144 billion in gold. Gaddafi had been elected chairman of the African Union and was proposing an alternative to the US dollar called the gold dinar. He was pledging to back Libya's $144 billion worth of gold to anchor it in a true commodity currency that would have been a revolution economically to be able to invest in a gold-based currency and have that be fungible across multiple countries. That would have definitely threatened the dollar system. And also, at the time, Libya was a French subsidiary, and so they were on a system called the CFE franc, where half of their reserves had to be held in francs. It's another banker trick. It's very similar to the petrodollar scam of the petrodollar, but it's called the CFE franc system. And so what happens? A NATO-led rebel insurgency topples the regime, and Gaddafi is essentially killed in a NATO airstrike, supporting a rebel force that captures him and kills him, and then all of that gold disappears. So $144 billion worth of gold disappears. I'm sure somebody in the American CIA had something to do with that. Hillary Clinton famously said, "We came, we saw, we killed him," or they died. We came, we saw, he died. Laughing about the fact that they instituted a regime change, and so I'm sure that's probably we're a lesson to others. And so now let's bring it fast forward to Maduro. So now Maduro is selling oil in something besides the US dollar. And he's selling it in yuan, and he's selling it in cryptocurrencies. And he had a currency called the petro, where they're selling it, and they're not abiding by the sanctions. So there's the shadow fleet of tankers where they're selling oil to Iran and other countries. They're swapping it. In some cases, they're supporting Cuba by giving Cuba, oil and gas for free. And so what happens? So the U.S. gins up an excuse of drug dealing. They have a public relations campaign where, for the weak-minded people that don't understand, they're blowing up, murdering people in what may or may not have been drug boats, may have been CIA drug boats, may have been fishing boats. We don't know. There were no trials. There were no investigations. There's just cold-blooded murder, including the cold-blooded murder of people that are clinging to the boat and then are hit again, famously by Hegseth and the head of the, Special Operations Command. And so cold-blooded murder, cold-blooded, a public relations thing to get the American people for weeks preceding this planned invasion to get in their minds, oh, Maduro is running drugs into the United States and there's all these drug boats that are coming into the United States and everything. That's why we're invading them. When the real reason we're invading them is because they're a threat to the dollar system and we're going to just steal these natural resources. $1 trillion of natural resources, oil. It's not just oil. They're rich in gold. They're rich in lithium. They're rich in other, minerals. And so now the U.S. is coming in. We're the big boy on the block and we're just going to steal it. And that is the policy because we have an organized crime government at the top. The U.S. government is being run as a criminal enterprise. It is obvious to anybody that is paying attention, but they're getting away with it because they have this control of all of the information that people receive through monopolized media and through the algorithmic censorship of the social media. They can turn up controlled opposition voices at the same time that they turn down, this right here, pirate signal. This is the Nebuchadnezzar, rising to the top and getting a pirate broadcast out. But they don't want you to know that this is organized crime. They don't want you to know that the whole system is illegitimate. They don't want you to know that you're trapped in a system. That there's no way to vote your way out. It's a completely rigged game. They own the casino. They own you're not going, they've got you trapped in this mindset of the rigged game. They own the Republicans and the Democrats. It's a giant puppet show. They're stealing these resources and they're going to just make up a bunch of stuff and put it on their little television, program and have their controlled opposition voices puppet it like it's real and it's legitimate. And it is, this is what we're up against, in Venezuela and why we really just invaded Venezuela.
Yeah, and I think you'd agree, right, that you mentioned, Maduro's kids or whatever running drugs. So there is some truth to Venezuelan government running drugs, but the U.S. government is doing it as well, as is the Mexican government. So it's basically, it's two cartels fighting each other. The organized crime.
So government is organized crime, and there's different organized crime families around the world, and every once in a while, one of the bigger organized crime families will lean on and steal, like the same way that they had mob wars in New York City and they fought over turf and whatever. And so you've got one organized crime system that for whatever reason, for banker interests, for somebody's interest, somebody paid off the right people, whatever, to implement this policy at this time. But a decision has been made that we're going to elbow out the one that has the franchise, the government franchise in Venezuela. We're elbowing them out. We're stealing these resources. We're going to reassign them to other people. And if you don't like it, we'll kill you. And, one of the things that I talked about in the interview, at artofliberty.substack.com with Jose, and we both agreed on, and he agreed completely, is that, the Venezuelan government sold Maduro, gave him away, to the U.S. government, stood down the military defenses, allowed a helicopter armada to fly into the country and remove him without engaging them with surface to air missiles and others. And I think that, the deal that they probably made with the Venezuelan military and with Durcy Rodriguez are, look, here's the deal. You're either going to be fabulously wealthy or we're going to kill you. Which one do you want? And that's real politics. That's how it really works. That's what's really going on. And it's now becoming kind of obvious, like Trump is making it obvious in a way that that, most other presidents really hedged it a lot better, but the iron fist is out of the velvet glove, and it's becoming, obvious that we're stealing things from other countries now.
Yeah, and as you were talking earlier, I was just thinking in my head, just as an example, what has the Mexican government done for me? Now, I'm not talking about again, people often get confused. We must separate the Mexican people, like just in this example, the people from the government. Like the Mexican culture and the people and the land and the history is different from the current regime, cartel, mafia, the government. And I'm thinking, like, what have they actually done for me? Nothing. They've always been an obstacle. I've had to ask them permission to do anything, to get my papers, my license. When you go down to the office and then the workers there, I remember when our kid was born, you got to go to the civil registry. Like, they have this look on their face, like, what do you want? And they don't even help you. It's like, you got to fight to get them to do what they're supposed to do. And it's like, can I have permission for my passport to travel? That I spent the whole day at the office. And okay, what have they done? They've subsidized the electricity and the water here for us. But I just mentioned the gas. Half of the gas price you pay is for their tax, and then the EVA 16% tax on anything you buy. So effectively, and then don't get me started on a security situation. It's state terrorism. Like, the cops here are working with the thieves to steal from you, and they give free rein to the extortionists and kidnappers. And so the cops, I can show you endless mainstream sources of Mexican papers where the cops are literally killing citizens and kidnapping them. And what has the government done for me? Nothing. Just made my life more difficult. I guess one of the last things I want to ask you is about the digital prison that's incoming. We're seeing the censorship, the stuff that's happening with Substack and other platforms. The digital ID is coming in quick everywhere, quicker here in Mexico where I am than some other places. But I'm reading now, just yesterday, I read that, like, Flock, that stuff that's going on in the US, Palantir, Flock, that they just made a deal to come together. I think Flock and Amazon Ring. So you're just seeing every time they're connecting everything and making it interoperable. So now they're going to have access to the Flock license plates, and that's going to be linked to the Ring cameras in everyone's homes. So it's going to be total surveillance. And just what are some of your thoughts when it comes to the technocracy?
So, again, so it's the banks on top. They're stealing the value out of everybody's money, and they're implementing a digital control grid. Not only, so the two things that they're doing, number one is they're implementing a digital control grid to be able to track, trace, monitor, and super tax people to a degree that they've never been taxed before, in a way that is kind of economic warfare against the population. And so what the ultimate goal is to replace physical cash with programmable digital money, either through a CBDC or a stable coin, or some kind of implementation where you're going to have a digital wallet, and they're going to be able to control how that money is spent, and they're going to be able to tax and trace every single penny that you buy and sell, whether it's at a garage sale, whether it's there's not going to be any more working under the table for anybody. There's not going to be any more discounts for paying cash. There's not going to be, they're going to suck all of the money out of people, and they're going to be able to turn off dissidents. They want to be able to take people like me and you, and they want to be able to turn off our ability to buy and sell, so we can't really tell the population what's going on. And then they want to be able to implement a number of different programs to keep the population in digital ghettos, physically to where you may not be able to buy gas out of your 15-minute city. You may not be able to travel outside of a certain radius. You may not be able to buy food, gas, or whatever outside of a certain radius. You might not be able to buy meat. You might not be able to buy, various things. And so that's the goal. And the other thing that they're working on is something called The Great Taking, which is a book, which is being exposed by a gentleman by David Rogers Webb, who I highly recommend that you have on the program. I can connect you to him if you would like to do so. But essentially what David Rogers Webb, who is a very accomplished hedge fund and financial industry insider and professional, has uncovered and put together is that they have changed in all 50 states the Uniform Commercial Code to change the ownership of stocks and bonds and various financial assets that in a collapse scenario engineered by the banks. They've done it before. They did it in the 1930s. They've waged economic warfare against the population by bankrupting and impoverishing them so that they don't have so that there's not you have to go to the mandatory government school because you can't afford the private school. You have to go to they're going to impoverish giant swaths of the population, forcing everybody onto the government plantation by default. But what they want to do is they want to steal stocks, bonds, pension funds that might be held by you by engineering a collapse where those assets get swept up through the bankruptcy of the fiduciary. So, if your brokerage account, if your broker, let's say you're with Charles Schwab and Charles Schwab goes out of business, the banks have made themselves the secured creditor, and Charles Schwab as the secured creditor, they actually have a preferential position in pooled assets that include the stocks that you think you own outright. Those are pooled asset, and you don't really have the kind of ownership that you think you have of it. And so those can be swept up to the banks. And that's really the gun that they have cocked. They have it ready to go. A lot of states, Tennessee is an example, South Dakota is another example. Legislators are proposing laws that would change the changes that were made to the Uniform Commercial Code that allows this. It was all done in secret over, decades time, but is now, coming to the forefront. And so they're waging this economic warfare against the population. They're building a digital prison at the same time that they have created a mechanism to steal the wealth of the population, that they could go like that. The gun is cocked. That's what we're up against. That's what we're trying to expose at the Art of Liberty Foundation. And we're doing so from a principled, voluntarist standpoint of government is illegitimate on its face. And, whether or not you believe in having a government or not, the U.S. government is being run as a criminal enterprise. Trillions of dollars are being handed out the back door to identifiable groups, being recycled into campaign contributions and puppet politicians that are going along with robbing the population, of literally the money that they earn and save. That's why prices are going up. This is why everything costs more. They're stealing the value out of the money the same way as if they stuck their hand in your pocket and stole the value out of their money. They're just doing it in a very sophisticated way that most people don't understand, and the mandatory government school and the rip-off state universities aren't going to explain to you.
And yeah, and I was just going to maybe ask you, I saw you mentioned on the other podcast, you've got a future project, which I think you said one of the goals is to help people survive. And my thoughts is, the past few weeks I've been thinking we all need to make as much money as we each can, given what's coming, this trying to impoverish us, to become as much of a ghost as possible, and a Matryoshka doll, right? So some of my strategies in dealing with the technocracy is getting a bunch of phones with different numbers from different countries, creating all of these different layers, some of them which lead nowhere, and just trying to become a ghost as much as possible, and having real assets, to your point of the great taking, because they'll do bail-ins. We're seeing now 50 Europeans are under civil social death, the algorithm ghetto. Everything, their accounts have been frozen. In some cases, some of their accounts, they haven't been given their money. So for now, they've essentially been confiscated. And so that if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And so just any final thought for us on any quick big picture tips on what people can do to try and survive, as well as any other final thought for us?
Well, how do you fight back? My number one recommendation is to keep cash alive and to use cash in almost every aspect of your life that you can. The only time I really don't use cash is at the gas pump. But other than that, I try and use cash, especially with local businesses, especially with local, mom and pops. When you use cash, you're starving the bank of 1.5% to 2.5%. The bank's not getting that fee. At the same time, you're saving the mom and pop, business 1.5% to 2.5%. There's more cash in society, so there's a better chance for us to weather a bank holiday or other shenanigans that they could do to try and steal everybody's cash or wipe it out, as they did in the 1930s. When you use cash, the owner of the business is able to keep more of that money off the books and not give it to, the organized crime, government, and taxes. And so using cash, having, dollar denominated, having some of your wealth in, beans, bullets, and Band-Aids should be your core wealth. Having some of your wealth in non-dollar denominated assets, gold, silver, platinum, real estate, other things that can't, that aren't, that can't be evaporated away, like the dollar can. And really, the number one thing you can be doing is, waking up others, because the good news message of my work is, and one of the things we're doing here at the Art of Liberty Foundation is, we're producing what I like to call the one-way revolution. And, government has been, my original book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History. It's been the biggest scam in history, but it only, they're only able to trick people until you understand how the magician does the trick. And once you understand that government is illegitimate on its face, you can never have a legitimate government. We don't really need government. And the government is running these unethically manipulative techniques on the population. Well, nobody likes to be tricked, fooled, chumped, or, and so then most people are out. And so that's a one-way revolution. And so it's only gathering steam. It's small right now, but it's growing, and has the ability to grow exponentially. And so, I mentioned earlier, there's a woman that's about to drop 258 copies of my book, To See the Cages, to Leave It, on her community. We've had dozens and dozens and dozens of people that are buying 5s and 10s and 20 copies. And so we're getting the word out, and that is only going in one direction. And once you realize that the government's tricking you and chumping you and how they do it, nobody goes back to that. And so I think we win in the end. And so the important thing is, and the message that we're trying to get out is that when government fails in an engineered collapse, we have to reboot on real freedom. And the good news message is that real freedom, you can have everything the government does, better, faster, and cheaper from the free market. People would be a lot wealthier. The economy would be more diverse. There wouldn't be, government monopolies. There wouldn't be money that loses value every year. Your dollar should be gaining more and more value every single year. Your dollar should be gaining, purchasing power as innovations and productivity improvements reduce the cost of manufacturing, distributing the luxuries and necessities of life, it's not that just that you're losing what they're stealing out of the value of the dollar, you're losing the wealth of appreciating purchasing power that is your birthright and is the way that money should work absent this crooked monetary system. And so we have the ability to be fabulously wealthy. We have the ability to fix this thing, but we have to reboot on real freedom. We have to get an understanding out there of the free market and the economics that produce public goods without government. And so that's the good news message of what we try and do here at the Art of Liberty Foundation.
All right. Well, your links are all in the description. So if people haven't already, they've got the website, the Substack, you've got multiple publications, the memes, the daily news, you've got the Telegram, you've got X, you've got a YouTube. They can get the store, the books in physical or digital version. I forgot to pull that out. I've got your book in hard copy behind me, and you also sell those USBs loaded with data. So people should check all of that out, and we must all continue to give them the tyrants hell. I also just would give advice not to in our interactions, not to be uncouth or curse or get angry, because when you do, they have a home court advantage. So I think we need to be firm in our responses. You know, when I go to the supermarket and they ask for my number, I'm like, what is this, the Soviet Union? Like, I'm serious but joking, getting that point across. Or if you're dealing with a government worker, you know, not getting all crazy, because when you do that, they're going to double down and they actually have more power. And so you want to do it in a way that's peaceable but firm, and I think you'll have more advantage that way. So thank you, Etienne. Keep on doing the good work, and we'll see you on a future transmission.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to kick these important issues around.